Hello there, sword friends. This is going to be a quick, informal, quasi-thoughts-based rambling about a Dynasty Forge Golden Eagle Daimyo series katana. Now, the Daimyo series has a few tiers. One is a Tamahagane tier. That's not going to be this one. This is the lesser tier. And the Golden Eagle, from what I can tell, retails for about $1,500 if you look at their website and find the similar version. This one is a bohi, but the one on their website doesn't right now. Anyway, nutshell, this is about a $1,500 retail sword. So other things that are kind of in that ballpark would be some of the higher end folded pieces from Hanwei, perhaps kind of in that realm. What else do we have? Well, in terms of what else is folded, there's not a lot of companies out there that make folded steel swords in this price bracket. So Hanwei is about the only one that comes to the top of my mind. But there's also higher end pieces from MAS, there's high end pieces from Citadel, but none of those are folded steel. In terms of what else is out there, if you have any that come to your mind, throw it in the commentary below. Now, this is kind of a quick informal deal because this sword just sold on eBay secondhand, ended up going for about 850 bucks, and it's owned by a friend of mine who asked me to help him out and sell it. So I can't really do a whole lot in terms of review, but I thought I might get to spend some time with it a little later on. Unfortunately, it sold before I got to it. So this informal, here's what I think is going to have to do for now. But enough explaining. Here I go with, starting from the butt of the sword as I commonly do. What you can see is that there are some eagle fittings. Now, you'll see this kind of golden eagle theme throughout this entirety of the blade. And what I notice is that they're kind of gold leafing or they're gold plating. Personally, the casting detail isn't bad, but at the same time, it really isn't that great either. And some of the gold plating looks a little tacky or cheap to me, but that's a subjective thing. Honestly, the casting quality is pretty decent, especially if I bring it up and maybe let you see the tsuba itself. Hopefully some of this is coming through. Let's see if we can get the eagle head in the shot here. I know it's upside downy backwardsy. Okay, come on, focus. Alright, so this isn't too bad where you can see the eagle. By contrast, this is a Hanwei Raptor series tsuba. So just to maybe give you a little bit of idea, the contrast and casting detail. Of course, if I can get them to focus and show you details. Here we go, so just a contrast. You can see that this one is just kind of plain and black, which isn't bad. And this one has got a little bit better, I think, patina on it. It doesn't feel as chalky or tacky in my hand. It's smooth to the touch as opposed to a little bit rough. The casting detail also goes all the way along the edge or the rim of the tsuba, which is nice. But at the same time, the details on it are pretty good in terms of the fittings overall. But I think Hanwei probably gets them a little bit cleaner in terms of the detail. And the gold plating isn't very well done in my opinion. I think really distracts or detracts from the overall look. I'd rather have something kind of like the Raptor with just a plain Jane black look to it, and I think the casting detail would probably come out better. But again, that's a personal preference. If I look at the handle, you see some blue silk that almost looks cotton-like. It doesn't have the same sheen as a lot of the other silks that you would see out there. The ito is not loose, but I wouldn't exactly call it tight either. It is serviceably tight or adequately tight. Perfectly functional, usable, but not what you would expect or necessarily dream of in a sword of this price category, and a custom wrap would be quite a bit tighter. The overall transitions and stuff as well, like little things like this, might be kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can get it up real close. But there's a little ledge on the end of the kasha right here. Maybe you can hear my fingers go at it. And that's not necessarily bad, but it's not great because a lot of time your hand placement is going to be down here, and it kind of starts to rub at you and pull at your fingers, and that's not necessarily a comfortable thing. Beyond that, though, the shaping isn't terrible. The transition between the koiguchi and fuchi, or the scabbard, and kind of this area is supposed to be pretty symmetrical or even, and they are. It looks like it's shaped just a little bit off, but not terribly weird or bad. The nodules and whatnot on the samegawa are pretty clean. There's a little bit of a rattle here. The tsuba wiggles, that's not uncommon. You might think like, hey, it's a $1,500 sword, so the tsuba shouldn't rattle. Temperature changes, things like that are going to cause the tsuba to rattle. So pretty much just taking a nail set to it will get it down. But what I'm not seeing is any spaces in between here that look, disastrous or anything like that. The tsuba rattle is overall actually pretty minor and something I'm confident could be relatively easily resolved. The saya is a black gloss, has a little koiguchi on the end. This is the metal cap. Instead of it being made out of horn, it's made out of metal, which is nice. I tend to lazily use my sword as a cane when I'm in class and lean on it, so this tends to wear out a little less quickly. The gloss black shows fingerprints pretty easily, which you can probably tell are showing up here. It's not too terrible to clean it off, but at the same time, this is one of the downsides to having gloss. The saya holds extremely tight though. In fact, it's probably a little too tight. I have to press, and if I put the saya in, it really starts to kind of grab firmly right here. And you have to apply a little bit more pressure to get it to go in. But that's easy enough to sand down a bit, and honestly gonna smooth out with use. The other thing that I noticed is that the saya you have to get it to go in just right, or it might bind up a little bit. There's a little bit of wiggle room in here, and so if you're not really paying attention to where your edge is, it doesn't exactly line up as well as you'd hope. And something about the habaki, just, I don't know, the lines on it in terms of the mount remind me a lot like, this is a production sword, and that it seems like these pieces may have been made independent of the blade and not, kind of put on the blade after it was already made and just kind of made to fit, which is kind of the production process from my understanding. But it leaves me, it just looks just a little bit off. Not terrible, not something that I'm going to be like, this is awful, but at the same time, I do have to compare it to $1,500 swords, but in fairness, the Hanwei blades kind of feel the same way. It's not anything that's different, but I keep in mind that at $1,500, a lot of people are expecting perfection. You don't really get that even when you spend 10 grand, but that doesn't stop people from expecting it. Now, up until this point, I'll note that I haven't had anything overwhelmingly positive to say, and this is where the tone of my thoughts are probably going to change around a little bit, because the blade itself is absolutely fucking amazing. Maybe that's a little much, but I know it as a kind of Natari or Ginome. I'm not great at telling you what kind of hamon it is, but it looks like it has a kind of frosty, simple pattern on it, something that doesn't look overall that great. But if my camera's picking it up, inside there is a really nice kind of tight hada to see. A really great pattern inside there. That the pattern in the steel actually reminds me a lot more of Nihanto or classic swords than other blades have. No, light has got to go this way. Now, keep in mind that this is a reproduction. It's not an antique piece. It's not as nice as an antique piece. This is definitely a reproduction. But for what I'm seeing inside the hada, it reminds me more of actual authentic Nihanto than other reproductions have. So I think if that's a characteristic that you're after, a kind of a nice pattern in the steel, this one gets a lot closer to that than other reproductions that I've seen have. The flats of the blade are pretty nice. Maybe you can make some of this out. The bohi has the characteristic wiggles and waggles. It's not as flat within that bohi surface, but the flats of the blade are well done and don't ripple around. The other thing I'm kind of impressed with actually is the Kissaki. Now, for Japanese sword aficionado lovers, this is not going to be anything fantastic if you're a Nihanto collector, but for a production sword, a lot of times people really just miss the Kissaki and don't pay any attention to it. But it has a different burnishing on it, and my light is not really showing it, but you can actually, the fact that the light is kind of showing where the Yakote is, or that transition line, is at least a good thing, that it's there, right? It's there, and it's reasonably clean and crisp. for a production sword, this is pretty good at this price point. Having a Kissaki that looks like this, I'd be pretty satisfied with it. And then the look of the blade, just overall the geometry and all of that, a little bit more kind of a classic style. It reminds me similar in stature to a Bugei Wave, or at least the way it looks, or maybe a Hanwei 47 Ronin katana look. But where it's different is how it feels. So the blade has a nicer hada on it, in my opinion. The hamon is got a, like a pattern to it, but if that's what you're looking for, this kind of style, then cool beans. But the way it feels is actually really, really nice. This blade feels nicer in my hand than it looks. It looks like it's going to feel a bit stouter, and in fact, it actually feels like a lighter version of the Hanwei Shinto, or just a really, almost like an iaido. It feels easy to move and controllable. It's very comfortable, and it kind of blows my mind when I pick it up, and that's unfortunately something that me as a reviewer, I'm hopefully gonna be able to articulate to you some idea about how this sword feels. And I could show you the point of balance. It's about 4.5 inches up, but I don't know if that even means anything, because it seems like most of the swords, when I measure the point of balance, are about an inch above or below 5 inches. Somewhere in that ballpark is where all of them end up being, but they have such varied characteristics that I really don't know what that's supposed to tell you. Anyway, I'll put it in the description below, but the way this sword feels is it's one of the best feeling swords in this price category. I felt most others feel heavy, kind of unbalanced. This is a thicker, bigger, longer sword. It's not small, but it feels extremely nimble and lively and easy to control. It feels balanced like an iaido does, and that is very surprising to me. It's not something I expected, especially because my experience with Dynasty Forge has been primarily with the Musha series, or their base line series, and those feel just like this big heavy crowbar, almost like wildly, and so then you kind of get a feeling like, maybe Dynasty Forge doesn't really know how to make, maybe they're making something that favors durability over finesse. And then you hold something like this and you're like, all right, kind of complete 180. This is a sword that is larger in stature, but they obviously did something right, because it feels just so lively and great in the hand. This would be one that I think would be a great candidate for having remounted. I'm not obviously a terrible fan of here down. I think, at this price point, it's not necessarily uncompetitive for what else is out there, but it's not great either. If you were able to find a blade like this and then have it remounted, and spend the money on getting, either use the same furniture or maybe change it, but have the handle redone, have it fitted up by somebody that really knows what they're doing, I think you'd have a really screaming blade, whether it be for practitioner purposes, for an iaido, or if you're looking for a shinken or a live blade, or just something that feels a lot more nimble and comfortable, but a really kind of top-notch feeling sword in the hand. Now, at $1,500 plus the cost of remounting, you're looking at the cost of a Citadel sword, or something like that, where a lot of those little details get done right. But what Citadel doesn't often give you in, say the $1,500 plus even $1,000 to have remounted, is a blade profile that has a more kind of classic shape to it. A little bit better polish, I would say, than the Citadel blade. It's folded as well and has a hada, something that you don't get there as well. So, but you have to go through the process of having it redone. Now, this one sold on eBay for about half that, about $850-ish bucks. And so if you got it secondhand, obviously they're out there because I just sold this one, you might be able to get that at a little bit lesser price point. But overall, I'm very impressed with the feeling of this blade. Not terribly impressed with the mount, but it's still serviceable and good. And I'm really impressed with how good this feels in the hand. And I'm sorry I don't get to do a more detailed review. I do have a different Dynasty Forge Daimyo series made from the Tamahagane line, and I might get a chance to do something a little bit more detailed with that. But in any endeavor, that is what I could do for you on the quick and dirty. I hope it was helpful. I hope it's a chance to see something from a different company that maybe you don't get to see a lot of stuff from. And that's about all I got for you. So as always, cheers, and thanks for watching.